You probably all know who Hannibal Lecter is, the fictional cannibal, serial killer, and clever psychiatrist who frightened people with his deeds and chilling composure. But in reality, there were and are people scarier and more dangerous than even Hannibal himself, played by Hopkins and Mikkelsen. In this episode, you'll find out about them. Alfredo Trevino. Few people know that Thomas Harris did not create the character Hannibal Lecter from scratch. Lecter's not just a figment of the imagination of the writer who gave the world The Silence of the Lambs, but a character largely created by the prototype of Alfredo Bally Trevino. In fact, Trevino is the real Hannibal Lecter. The only scary thing is that Lecter is only the character of the movies and books, while Trevino was walking around among us. Trevino was a Mexican surgeon. While working as a medic in 1959, Trevino got into an argument with his coworker. Precedent led Trevino to finish off the employee in cold blood, choosing the scalpel as his weapon, and then dispose of the body in cold blood as well. He didn't escape punishment. The crime was disclosed and the surgeon was sentenced to execution. Then, however, the sentence was commuted, and after 20 years of imprisonment, Trevino was released. He died in 2009. Writer Thomas Harris interacted with Trevino personally, as Clarice Starling did with Hannibal in books and films. The writer took a lot from Trevino's image and personality and then endowed these traits with Hannibal Lecter, a character who became one of the most famous and recognizable in history. Pedro Lopez. If Hannibal can be called one of the most dangerous men in books and movies, Pedro Lopez can be called one of the most dangerous men in reality. What's more, this man is considered by many to be the most dangerous man on the planet. And no wonder. In 2006, he made it into the Guinness Book of World Records as the most prolific criminal, with over 300 victims under his belt. Pedro Lopez, a Colombian, is one of the cruelest serial killers in history. He became one in large part because of his horrible childhood full of dislike and abusive behavior. As a child, Lopez committed theft, stole cars, suffered poverty, begged, and more. Despite his revenge, arrest, and years spent in jail, Lopez did not calm down, but instead turned on full force. Upon his release, he began committing horrific crimes one after another. Where is this man who's been called a monster in the media? No one knows. Pedro Lopez is now free and could be anywhere. He might even be in your town. Jason Barnum. Jason Barnum has not committed as many crimes as Pedro Lopez, but there's a reason he's in this episode. Because he truly is creepy. His tattooed body, cold stare, and tattooed eye are a scary combination. No wonder Barnum's called the Terminator. There are similarities between the two. About 10 to 15 years ago, Barnum was a burglar. Burglaries are bad crimes, but at least he didn't hurt anybody, you might say. That's not true. During an arrest, Barnum started shooting at cops and wounded one of them. He was eventually arrested, charged with theft and armed resistance to law enforcement, and sentenced to 22 years in prison. Barnum had already served about half of his sentence. The criminal didn't repent of what he had done, believing that it was better to be notorious than to be unknown. He became a celebrity, but his fame is mostly known within the prison walls. Appearances can be deceiving, but that's not the case with Jason Barnum. Looking at him, you realize that this man can be dangerous. The creepy thing is that sometimes very nice people can be much more dangerous. Stay tuned to see such people who turned out to be real monsters and learn about other dangerous, scary, and evil personalities. Rodney Alcala. In this footage, you see an old American show. Everyone here seems to be kind. Even by the looks of it, they are. But one of those present, Rodney Alcala, is a real demon hiding under the mask of a smiling man. Many people call him the most terrifying and dangerous man in American history, and in many ways, he was. He was a serial killer who committed his acts in the 1970s. By the way, that's when this episode of the show starring him was filmed. It's creepy to realize that the most dangerous criminal, who wasn't even known about at the time, came on a regular show. Over the years, Rodney killed at least 9 people, though it's believed there may have been as many as 130 victims, and they easily disposed of them. Thanks to his eloquence and wit, he avoided punishment for decades. The monster photographer died in July of this year. John Wayne Gacy. Everyone knows about Pennywise the Clown, but far fewer people know that when creating the novel It, Stephen King invented the image and appearance of Pennywise based on a real person, John Wayne Gacy. He went down in history as the killer clown and as one of the most evil, dangerous, and creepiest people in the world. John Gacy was a notorious American maniac. As with many famous criminals, it all started with a horrible childhood. John was born into a dysfunctional family in which his father drank and his mother suffered from his beatings. Plus, as a child, John was harassed and bullied by his peers. All of this left a deep imprint and changed John's psyche, so eventually he became a maniac. In the 1970s, Gacy performed as a clown at holidays. He would pick out a victim, lure them to him, and then massacre them in cold blood. There were at least 33 of Gacy's victims. It took police a long time to figure out who was behind it all. At first, they couldn't even think of Gacy. Could a mild-mannered clown, public figure, and political activist be a brutal maniac? As it turned out, he could. When the secret was revealed, Gacy was arrested and sentenced to execution. While awaiting his sentence, the murderer drew clowns in his cell. These drawings were then sold for large sums of money. A Hungarian aristocrat, a countess of a famous family, and the richest lady of high society in Hungary of her time. What could possibly be wrong with this woman? Surely she spent her life at receptions and balls, socializing culturally and taking enormous care of herself. There is some truth to that, except that Bathory had a hobby. She was a maniac. And not just any maniac, but an incredibly prolific, creepy, and dangerous one. She was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for the number of her victims. There were 600. Even the monster from Colombia, Pedro Lopez, doesn't seem so terrible compared to her. The Countess's victims were mostly local peasant women who were lured to the castle by the offer of well-paid work. There were also some noble women, daughters of nobles who had come to the Bathory estate to study court etiquette. It was in the castle that the Countess carried out her evil deeds, torturing and tormenting people. It was even said that she was a vampire and used the blood of her victims to keep her young. The crazy thing about this whole story is that the only punishment Bathory received was life in prison, and she served time not in some cold dungeon but in her own castle. 600 victims and ordinary house arrest. How you like that? There was an even scarier, more terrifying, and dangerous man who could even give Elizabeth Bathory a head start. The man in question was Thug Behram, an Indian who lived in the second half of the 18th and first half of the 19th centuries. He was a member of the Thuggee cult, comprised of Indian bandits and brigands who devoted themselves to the service of Kali, the goddess of death and destruction. Behram excelled at destruction, not only more than anyone else in his cult, but more than anyone else in the world, as many scholars call him the most prolific murderer in history. It's believed that 931 people were killed by him. That hardly sticks in my mind. Even the most egregious maniacs known throughout the world don't seem so disgusting on the background of this Indian. However, the Indian himself said that he had 125 victims on his account, and the number 931 came from the fact that he was present at 931 murders. In any case, no matter what number we take, Thug Behram was a maniac and an immoral monster. He was punished more severely than Elizabeth Bathory, who spent her last days in a luxurious castle. In 1840, Thug was executed. Felicien Kabuga. One doesn't have to be a maniac to go down in history as an extremely dangerous, frightening, and terrifying person. Felicien Kabuga is a perfect example of this. Initiated, organized, and financed the mass extermination of the Tutsi people in Rwanda. This extermination went down in history as one of the largest and most savage genocides of all time. It took place in 1994 when a plane carrying the president of Rwanda crashed. Kabuga blamed the Tutsis for the tragedy and immediately radioed the Hutus to avenge the death of the president. What happened shortly thereafter is beyond comprehension. In just 3 months, up to 1 million people were exterminated. Kabuga was soon wanted for crimes against humanity, but he escaped, becoming one of the most wanted criminals on the planet. He managed to hide for a long time. Only last year, the Rwandan monster was caught and arrested. No trial has yet taken place, but it's already clear that the punishment will be the harshest. That's all, guys. What person do you consider the most terrible and dangerous in history? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you later.